Well, welcome back to the Rediscover the 80s podcast and another episode of Rank 'em, the show that remembers your favorite things from the 1980s in a fun countdown format. I am your host, Jason Gross, and we are continuing to celebrate the 30th anniversary of 1988 on Rank 'em. My guest for this episode is making his debut on the Rediscover the 80s podcast. He is the retro mastermind behind retroramblings.com, and he's also got a YouTube show called Retro Rewind with his daughter sometimes. And we've actually collaborated several times through his Retro Roundtable and doing some blog shares together. Please welcome Mickey Yarber. How are you, Mickey?
Doing good, Jason. So happy to be on your show because I listen quite often. And like I said, we've collaborated quite a bit in the past, and it's always fun to remember the past with you. So I'm looking forward to this today.
Cool. Well, I appreciate you being here and appreciate what you do there on your website. Tell everybody that's listening, if they haven't heard of you or heard of your website before, what exactly you like to do over there.
Anything that strikes my brain that I remember from a kid, I put something up on the site, retroramblings.com. Retro videos on, like Jason mentioned, Retro Rewind show on YouTube. And I open old packs of cards on video so you can live vicariously through me opening and having a good time. And I'm starting to get into introducing a lot of the old fun stuff to my daughters. There's a video we put up a month ago of me teaching her how to play Pogs, and had a blast with that. She had never seen them before, and I got to go back. It gave me an excuse to go back and play Pogs again. So anything old and fun from the 80s and 90s, you know, we're just remembering it and helping you remember it too.
Yeah, I do enjoy it. Mickey's starting to do some podcasting, and we're talking about those non-sports trading cards over there with Bonsai Retro Club. That was a really fun show to listen to, and you've kind of got me inspired to go back and maybe start collecting some of those that I've missed along the way. But yeah, that's really fun. I think we are a kindred spirit for sure, as far as what we like to post online and through our websites and such. I'm sorry, were you gonna?
No, go ahead.
Okay. Well, tonight me and Mickey are gonna rank our top 5 TV shows that debuted in 1988. But before we get into our favorites, let's give a little context like I like to do, and we'll give you the top 10 shows as rated by the Nielsen Media Research through the fall of 1988 through the spring of 1989. And then I'll also give you a few little moments in TV history from that year. But first, the top 10, and we can just kind of buzz through these and see if any of these connected with you. Number 10 was Anything But Love on ABC.
Never heard.
I don't recall this one at all either. Number 9, Empty Nest on NBC. Do you remember Empty Nest?
Yeah, we'll cover it more here in just a little while.
Number 8, the staple on Sunday nights, Murder, She Wrote on CBS. That show seemed like it ran for a decade at least. I don't know what the actual numbers are, but Miss Jessica Fletcher seemed to be, you know, up into the hundreds and hundreds of murders solved on that show.
You know, I'd like to see what the murder rate of that small town in New Hampshire, wherever they were, because hell, how many people got murdered in that town?
Wasn't anybody left. She, you know, had to go to the next town or something.
Interesting fan theory on that show that looking back in hindsight, there's a theory that Jessica Fletcher was a serial killer and would commit the crimes in order to have a story to write, and for murder.
I can see that.
Yeah. The show takes on a new perspective if you try to watch it through those eyes. Yeah, it's a lot better way than it used to be.
Okay. Number 7, Who's the Boss on ABC. I watched Who's the Boss mainly occasionally in like reruns, syndication, more than the actual, you know, time frame when it was first broadcast.
Yeah,
just show it here and there, but never really connected with me too much.
Me either. It never was my bag.
Number 6, The Golden Girls on NBC. And we talked about this a little bit on the 1987 show, but I did watch that one on occasion, mainly with my grandmother, but I would watch episodes too in syndication.
It was a Saturday night staple in our house with me and my mother. I loved Golden Girls. I still love Golden Girls.
Number 5 was 60 Minutes. That was always back to back there with Murder, She Wrote on Sunday nights on CBS.
Longest 2 hours of television.
Yeah. That clock ticking, you know, you're waiting for that bomb to go off. Just take the show out, please.
And when you're a kid without a television in your own room and your mom watches 60 Minutes of Murder, She Wrote every Sunday night, that's a long 2 hours right
there. Number 4, Cheers on NBC. I have watched some Cheers. I've gone back and watched some Cheers along the way too. I've never sat down and watched the whole, whatever, 8 or 9 seasons of it though.
I've watched a good portion of it. I'm a Woody fan. I like the Woody years, and especially even the later years when Wings was on right behind it, and they had a lot of crossovers.
Yes, Wings.
Those are the Cheers years for me.
Gotcha. Number 3, A Different World on NBC. I did watch some of A Different World, mainly, you know, back to back with The Cosby Show. But if you'll remember from 87, our 87 show, Cosby and Different World were 1 and 2. So in 88, Roseanne actually took over the number 2 spot on ABC. And we'll talk probably a little bit more about Roseanne here in a minute, but it wasn't really one of the shows that ever connected with me that I watched like on a season-to-season basis. Roseanne.
Same way on Different World, though. We watched it because it was on right after The Cosby Show.
Yeah. And to no surprise, number 1 is The Cosby Show in 1988, again on NBC. So that's your top 10 from 1988. Let's have a few moments in TV history. January 4th, 88, Nick Jr. made its debut and featured shows like Pinwheel, Eureka's Castle, and then some of the syndicated animated shows that they broadcast: David the Gnome, Adventures of the Little Koala, Curious George, and Belle and Sebastian. So I do remember watching Pinwheel, I think a lot earlier than that.
Yeah, me too. Not a
David the Gnome, I remember watching a little bit of David the Gnome here and there. I watched a lot of Nickelodeon as a kid.
I remember Pinwheel. 88 was the year we got cable. It wasn't available where I grew up, and when we moved, it was the summer of 88 I got cable. But when I would stay with my aunt in 86, 87, I remember Pinwheel being on. But never, again, wasn't my bag. Even back then when I was supposed to like it when I was 6, 7 years old, I didn't care much for it.
Fair enough. February 5th of 88, Hulk Hogan and Andre the Giant compete on WWF's The Main Event on NBC, which marked the return of professional wrestling to network primetime for the first time since 1955. So that was a big deal, wrestling back in primetime.
Still the most watched wrestling match in history. Ungodly 15 point whatever rating back in the day, and nothing. Even the Monday Night Wars in the late 90s never even come close.
Never even touched it.
Number of eyes all that match. So.
I can definitely see that. May 1st, Magnum PI broadcast its 2-hour season finale, or series finale, I should say, on CBS. So that was, I want to say it started in maybe 1980, somewhere in there, because it was, I know it was on, you know, about the time that Raiders of the Lost Ark came out, which was 1980, because he was actually up for the part for Indiana Jones. So that was a long show, 8 or 9 seasons there.
Yeah, hey, good news though, he's coming back this fall, or the new version of him's coming back. Are you going to watch it? I'm going to give it a shot and see.
I'm going to at least watch the pilot, just based on the trailer. Have you watched the trailer?
I have. Yeah, the trailer was pretty cool.
It did. It looked a little Fast and Furious style. It had pretty much every car that he was in seemingly got destroyed in that trailer. So I'm like, what was he going to drive in the second episode? Because it seems like they went through every single Ferrari they could find. Well, I don't know.
The wife and I are big fans of the modern Hawaii 5.0, and we stream it all the time. And in the trailer, they mentioned the 5-0 team, so I imagine they're going to tie in at least for the first season. So I'm sure we'll watch at least the whole first season, if no other reason than my wife will make me. So I'll let you know how it goes.
Okay. Yeah, we got into Hawaii 5-0 first maybe like 2 seasons, and then it ended with there. A lot of those Lost characters seemed to show up from time to time, which made me hooked because I watched a lot of Lost. But yeah, I'm curious. I like that they brought back TC's helicopter in the trailer too. So I'm curious. We'll put it that way.
Well, I know
At least. Go ahead.
This is retro, but a couple seasons ago on Hawaii 5-0, they had to use a helicopter, and just as a visual Easter egg for us old school fans, it was TC's helicopter that the Hawaii 5-0 were using. So
nice. That's good. I like that. A couple more here. July 4th, 1988, 3 years after its cancellation by ABC, CBS resurrects Family Feud for its daytime lineup, featuring the new host, Ray Combs. I remember watching a lot of Family Feud, and mainly with Ray Combs.
Yeah, me too. Every sick day out of school. And in the summertime.
Right, summertime as well. August 9th, 1988, special primetime edition of the Game of the Week, which featured the first official night game at Wrigley Field between the Cubs and the Mets. Yeah. I remember that being a big deal when that happened. I don't remember if I did watch the game or whatever, but I remember it being a big deal in the sports world at that time that they were going to finally do a night game at Wrigley.
Oh yeah, to this day, my cousin Mango says that having lights at Wrigley Field is still sacrilegious today. It was.
You can see that. Yeah. All right, a couple more, and then we'll get into our list here. October 3rd, Turner Cable Channel TNT made its debut, and they debuted it by showing Gone with the Wind. I'm not sure how many viewers stuck around to watch that whole thing, but I remember TBS TNT watching a lot of those. And TNT, if I do remember correctly, was where I filled up a 6 or 8 hour tape of the Pink Panther. They used to broadcast the Pink Panther in the morning, and I would tape the episodes.
They would also broadcast it there in that first year at night at like 7:30, 6:30, 7. Anyway, when TNT debuted, like I said, I just got cable that year, and that became a nightly tradition, was watching Bugs Bunny and Friends or Looney Tunes, whatever they titled it. Yeah. Fraggle Rock and The Muppet Show, the old reruns. So, and I remember Pink Panther being in there some too.
Yep. And then the last little bit here, November 3rd, talk show host Geraldo Rivera, he gets his nose broken during a taping of his show when a fight begins on the set between guests. And I remember that pretty vividly as well. He had some raucous shows from time to time, and I remember that making like national news that he got his nose broken, you know?
Yeah.
All right. Well, that was a quick little look at 1988 television. And just quickly, you know, the ground rules for Rank 'em. These are lists that are basically our personal favorites, you know, not what should be at the top or what was, you know, based on the ratings or something. So these are just our personal favorites. And we're not going to do any animated shows. We'll maybe tackle the cartoons for another Rank 'em show. So we're just doing the live action and prime time and syndicated shows that first came out in 1988. So without further ado, Mickey, what is your number 5 pick for 1988?
Number 5, a little bit off the wall for a television show, but NWA Main Event Wrestling. You know, in March that year, they had the first Clash of the Champions. I guess technically that's a television show debut, but Ted Turner liked the ratings so much, he went to the NWA and said, hey, I want a Sunday afternoon show with nothing but main event matches, and that's what they put on for the first several months anyway, on Sunday afternoons. And as a hardcore wrestling fan back then, tuning in every week to see the top stars against each other, that was pretty awesome concept considering how wrestling normally was on television. But I don't remember what all the matches on the first episode were. There were 3. I don't remember the third one. I remember Dusty Rhodes and Ivan Koloff, and I remember the 6-man tag with 3 of the Horsemen against Sting, Barry Windham, and Lex Luger, and just couldn't wait for the following week because, you know, this was before, again, the Monday Night Wars when that was a necessity to have main event matches all the time.
Right.
You would tune in, you'd see 7 matches, none of them competitive, and you're just watching for the storyline development. But then this come along, and you were actually able to watch just for the match quality itself, and that was a big deal. TBS, I think it was. Well, I was going to say what time it was, but it altered quite a bit because of Braves baseball and Atlanta Hawks basketball.
Oh yeah, that's right. It would like come on right after the game or something.
Yeah, they, you know, I think its normal time slot was 5:35. But some weeks it would be 3:35. Some weeks it'd be 7:35, just depending on the baseball schedule. So it was kind of hard to keep up with. You really had to want to watch it to find it a lot of times. And I usually found it. So
yeah, I was trying to remember exactly what network it was, if it was TBS that it was on. But yeah, that was about the time I watched a lot of WWF, mainly, what was it, Saturday? Was it the Saturday show that they had? I don't know. Anyway, that's when I kind of got into wrestling. Was I think as a kid, it was on the weekends, and of course the Hulk Hogan's Rockin' Wrestling on Saturday morning. And then I do remember when the NWA kind of was starting out, and I kind of got a little bit interested in that with the Horsemen and Sting and Lex Luger and all them, and then, but it was probably, I don't know, a lot later when I started watching like the NWA and WCW wrestling more, or about the same as WWF.
Well, then we're opposite because I actually cut my teeth on NWA, and I found WWF later. So, you know, usually whichever one you find first is the one you're a fan of, and the other just doesn't seem as nice. But regardless of which one I liked, Saturdays and Sundays, if it was wrestling and it was on, I was trying to watch it. WWF Superstars, Challenge, All American. Of course, like I said, we got cable then, so I had prime time on Monday nights, and the NWA Saturday night, and main event, and NWA Pro. Yeah, watched all that.
Yeah,
bit of it.
Yeah. It was. I was kind of the same way. I vaguely remember an afternoon show, maybe after school, that they had on one of those cable networks, and I remember watching like the Von Erichs and the Great Kabuki, and oh gosh.
That can't remember. Legends of World Class Wrestling on ESPN every afternoon.
ESPN, okay, yeah, I remember watching that. Those names kind of stand out to me, just, you know, on the show. I remember the Great Kabuki like spitting that green stuff at people, you know, and my grandmother would be like, "Oh, what are you watching?" You know.
Well, and see, then you were into retro before you knew it, because that was '88, but those matches they were showing were from '83. They were already 5 years old at that point.
Oh wow, okay. I had no idea that was the case.
Yeah, where they were doing that daily show, they ran from the first, I don't know, syndicated episode of World Class, which started in '82, and they just ran them all the way up through current day. I think they caught up in 90, 91, just before they sold the company. So yeah, you were watching the old stuff and didn't even know it. Cool.
All right, well, let's go on to my number 5 pick. And this one I kind of got into thanks to my dad, who was huge into Fox. And this was one of those he had to watch. And it was America's Most Wanted, hosted by John Walsh. And my dad, I don't know what it was. He wouldn't watch any kind of news, current events and stuff, but you know, you put the top criminals on TV and he's going to be watching, you know, like he's going to be able to catch one. But that's where I kind of first started watching America's Most Wanted. And like I said, I remember it being a staple in our household for several years. I think it went back to back with Cops, and we would watch that. I want to say it was maybe Friday night that was on. Can't remember right off the top of my head.
That sounds
but yeah, it was just such an interesting show because, you know, up until like this first little bit of reality type shows, you know, it was all just the cop drama shows, stuff that people like to watch, but it wasn't the real, you know, kind of real people they're putting on TV. And they actually put like an 800 number up there that you could call if you'd seen one of these jokers. But you know, I don't know what it was about it, but it sucked me in too with my dad. And so we're watching you know, all these you know, kind of go through and actually they would follow up, I think, like they did with Unsolved Mysteries, where if they catch one of them, then they'd feature it, you know, like on the next episode or something, and thank the viewers for tips and all that stuff. But yeah, I think it lasted quite a while, if I do remember the show.
I know it had to last up through the mid-90s because we had a place at the lake, and when it would be raining, we'd go in, and on Friday nights we'd watch it, and that would have been 93, 94, 95. So it was on a while, but can you imagine how good a programming block would be if you had America's Most Wanted with Unsolved Mysteries and maybe Rescue 911 that you would watch about last That's a good 3 hours of television right there.
No kidding, man. Yeah, we ought to start like our own channel. It's like the you know, I don't know, early reality mystery and crime solving show network or something. But actually, I just looked it up. It was the longest running program in Fox's history. I guess up through The Simpsons now is past it, but it was on for 25 seasons.
Wow. I didn't think it was that long.
Yeah, I didn't think it was either, but up through June of 2011 was when it was canceled. Yeah, I didn't realize that. But
do you know if John Walsh was the host the whole time?
It kind of looks like he was still involved up through towards the end of it, at least. It did move to, looks like it moved to Lifetime for one season at the end from Fox. Don't know why, but yeah. I mean, and if you've ever heard his story, and I think he's featured it on the show, you know, and how he became the host and, you know, actually started the show. It's a real interesting story.
Moved to Lifetime.
Yeah.
On tonight's episode, we're looking for the man that bullied this girl's daughter.
Oh yeah, we better stop there. I could go. Anyway, all right. So America's Most Wanted was my number 5. What was your number 4?
We're gonna go back to something you mentioned earlier on, and that's Empty Nest. And I don't know if that's because of a lack of options of great 1988 TV shows, or if it's the nostalgia for the whole night. Because my old man traveled a lot, and more Saturdays than not, he wasn't home, and my brother worked, and so it was just me and my mom at home on Saturday nights watching TV, and we had that routine down. 8 o'clock NBC. It was 227, and then Amen, Golden Girls, and then Empty Nest just falls right into there. You know, it's set in the same world with the Golden Girls, and the characters crossed over from show to show. And it was a good show on its own, not just as a part of the block. You know, you had the doctor who was married, but his wife passed away, and his daughters moved back home. And he had the wacky neighbor. Well, he had, what was his name? Charlie on one side, wacky neighbor, but then he had the Golden Girls on the other side. So I'm drawing a blank on the old woman's name on the Golden Girls now. Sophia. She would come in from time to time, and I don't know. It was just a fun show. Everybody's trying to get Harry married off, and he's resisting it, and he just wants to live a peaceful life, and everybody keeps meddling. It was a fun show. It like I said, though, it may be more to do with nostalgia with my mother. But that was a pretty good lineup all the way through, and especially if you had a Saturday night where you're going to get Saturday night's main event at 11:30, not long after it. I mean, you know, order some pizza and play some Nintendo while the news is on, and you've got a pretty powerful Saturday night right there.
Right. Yeah. I'll talk a little bit more about Empty Nest a little bit later, but yeah, everything you mentioned, you know, the crossover with the Golden Girls, Charlie, the Suzu guy, the next door neighbor, you know, that's always meddling. And then they brought in Roz, Marsha Warfield, for a little bit towards the end too.
Yeah.
That was on Night Court. So there was a lot to love about Empty Nest. And like I said, I'll talk a little bit more about that a little bit here. But go ahead.
I don't remember what year it was now, but they added the show Nurses too. And I don't know if you remember that cool crossover they done about the hurricane and hitting Miami, and
I do remember that. Yes,
3 episodes of Golden Girls, Empty Nested Nurses. That was an early crossover concept that worked pretty well for TV, if I remember right. I think me and my mom watched all 3 of those, like event viewing. We knew it was coming because of TV Guide, and we we're going to be there to watch it.
Yeah, yeah. That I had totally forgotten about that, but it does ring a bell. The crossover with the hurricane and what's going on with each of them that were set in that same world. And they like to do that, it seemed like they created a world to see like, well, maybe we can spin this off later. And they would, pop in a few characters here and there to see if the audience gravitated towards them, Well,
that's a smart way to do it.
It is. Yeah, it really is. You take a popular show and just try to, grab one of those characters and spin off. So very good choice. I like that choice. Number 4 for me, we're going to go back to Saturday Morning, and I don't know what it is about this guy, but I remember watching this. It didn't last very long. As a matter of fact, I think it was only the 1 season. Hey, Vern, it's Ernest on Saturday Morning. Oh, my gosh. And I loved I don't know what it was about Ernest, but I loved the mix of the show because they would do the sketches, and I think they had some other things in between, like little cartoons or something. It was kind of like Pee-wee's Playhouse almost, but Jim Varney and all of his characters, the mom and then he had his I think Bobby. I don't know if Bobby and his brother were on the show. I think Bobby was, but those 2 guys and just everybody that he would come up with, all those characters popping in, on the show, it made it entertaining for me, for the whatever 12-year-old that I was, to watch it. Did you watch it?
I watched it on and off, but I was always a big fan of the Ernest movies in general, and they seem to get a lot of flack. Maybe this is not a good way to put it, but the Ernest movies are not well respected in the movie community. But Jim Varney was a comedic genius for all the characters he created and the world that he helped create. Whether you know or not, Jim Varney was a classically trained actor. He went to Europe and traveled, and he actually homesteaded right here next to me at the famous Barter Theater here in Abingdon, right down the road. For years, he was, a lead actor around here before he became famous, but a comedic genius, just a genius all the way around. You could watch a lot of his parts, and he's been in a few other things besides the Ernest stuff where he's playing straight, and he just blows you away with his acting. And it's a shame he didn't get the respect for what he created, because critical acclaim, maybe not, but if you add up the dollars that all of his productions made, that man, that's, generally that's the whole point in entertainment, is to make money with it. And he did that. So he shouldn't get the bad rap that he gets from a lot of people.
Yeah, I can see that. And I think it's because he kind of came up in the advertising world, and he was doing commercials first. I think it was really when he got recognized as Ernest, and didn't really get, coming through the advertising industry, which is not really well respected anyway. And then trying to get into Hollywood, I can see why people might have, put their nose down to him. But I don't know. I think you're right in the respect that he had a lot to give, and a lot of people overlook how talented he was, just for the little, having an audience of children mainly. You're not going to get the respect,
right?
And I know, but he did win a daytime Emmy for that show. I just saw that. So for what it's worth, that he did get a little bit of respect when that show came on. So.
And I know Wyatt gives you a lot of crap, but I'm with you on watching Ernest Saves Christmas every year. I mean, that's a tradition around here.
Yes.
I'm not sure if that's a real supportive, because we also watch a Very Brady Christmas every year here too. So our judgment on classic Christmas may.
Yeah, the Brady's, no, I probably wouldn't watch that one, but I remember watching Ernest Goes to Camp in the movie theater when it first came out. And from there on, I was hooked on Ernest. So, yeah, for what it's worth, yeah, Christmas, I'll back you. I'll back anybody up 100% on watching that one.
Well, Ernest Goes to Camp holds a special place in my heart for 2 reasons. One, it was just damn funny. But 2, my uncle who lived next to us where I grew up got the first VCR around that we had. The first movie he rented and the first movie I watched on VCR was Ernest Goes to Camp. So that that's a milestone, if nothing else, in my life, watching Ernest Goes to Camp on VCR.
And that was truly a family movie. You know, it was rated G, no real cussing, and it was a little, you know, I can't remember. It's been so long since I watched it. You know, there's a little rude humor now and then that comes out, you would say, but yeah, that's one that I can definitely share with my kids. All of the Ernest movies, pretty much, and be totally fine with it. You know, that was another good thing about Ernest. But okay, well, enough about Ernest. Let's get on to your number 3 pick.
Yeah, kind of going the opposite direction from Ernest. In the Heat of the Night with Carroll O'Connor.
There you go. Okay.
Paired right behind Matlock on NBC on Tuesday nights. That was the Tuesday night viewing at our house because Dad was usually in town. And matter of fact, I go see my old man now in the afternoons, and he's still watching In the Heat of the Night on WGN every day. But you know, I would have been 10 when that debuted. I may not have really got into it until a year or two into it myself, but I remember it being, for a 10-year-old, it would hold my attention. You know, even though it wasn't a kid's show then, I could watch it and get into it. And I go watch it with him now, and it still holds up today. You know, 30 years later, it's still other than the outdated looking cars and there's no cell phones, other than that little stuff, it still holds up today as a really good show in general, but a police show especially. And big cast of characters: Bubba Skinner, Virgil Tibbs, and Carroll O'Connor's character. Just your normal, I ain't gonna say normal procedural cop show. There was generally a murder, and usually you had racial tension in every episode, being set in Sparta, Mississippi. You would have the inclinations that this was a race-driven crime, but it would usually turn out that it wasn't, of course. But yeah, just a really good cop show. And one, again, nostalgia plays a big part, that watching it with the whole family. But I can remember watching it from the time it come on up through the series finale. So it was one I stuck with all the way through. And that's more than I can say for most shows on this list today.
Cool. Yeah, there was one that I remember catching an episode here and there, mainly in reruns. My wife loved the show, and I remember we watching a few episodes from time to time when it would be just on cable or whatever when we first got married. But yeah, I don't know. I don't know if it was just the fact that I couldn't get Carroll O'Connor as Archie Bunker out of my head or something, but it just wasn't one that I got into and would watch like on a weekly or even have gone back to watch. But I know it's got a lot of, you know, critical acclaim, and what I do remember, the episodes, like you were saying, it got me into that world of racial tension more than I'd ever really been into on some of those shows. And that seems to stick out in my mind is what I remember from the show, from when I did watch it.
Yeah, and unfortunately for me at the time, I've since remedied this, but I was not familiar with Carroll O'Connor as Archie Bunker. I had never watched Archie Bunker, All in the Family, up until that point. That was my introduction to Carroll O'Connor as an actor. So for me, it was kind of the opposite. I watch In the Heat of the Night, and then later, as I got older, I go back and try to watch All in the Family, and it seems like, you know, such a weird character compared to what I was used to seeing. On In the Heat of the Night, he ended up marrying the black DA.
Right. Yes.
Then you try to watch him All in the Family.
Totally opposite.
And I think maybe that was a brilliant part of casting for In the Heat. Of course, he played in the movie too, but just the way they wrote his character in The Heat of the Night was brilliant, just to go opposite of how he had always been written on television before.
Yeah, and I'm sure that was intentional, I would guess, by him, just to, you know, kind of get away from that typecast. But yeah, so I was the opposite of that, and kind of going into that, you're like, okay, wow, you know, it is eye-opening from his character on All in the Family, which, you know, my grandmother would stay up. She was a night owl, and she would stay up and just watch reruns of sitcoms, and that was always in the mix. I remember watching that with her. So yeah, that was a little bit eye-opening as far as his typecast on that show. But anyway, okay. Well, that's a good pick, man. I can totally back you on that one. You might not back me on this one for my number 3 pick, but I'm going to do it anyway. We talked a little bit about it on our memory jogger with the game shows, and that's the Fun House, which was a kids game show on Fox, and it was just something that, I don't know, a lot of these shows that had the obstacle course or had this crazy end game, bonus game at the end of the show as the ultimate goal to get to. I don't know, a lot of those sucked me in. And like I said, I watched a lot of Nickelodeon, a lot of game shows as a kid. So this fit perfectly. It was hosted by J.D. Roth. And he was on, I think, a couple other kids game shows. I'll have to look them up, but this was a fun little mix of the physical challenges. They had the twin cheerleaders that were like the co-hosts, and the ultimate goal was to get to the fun house at the end and pull these tags to win prizes and cash. And they had some crazy stuff, it was literally like a fun house you would find at a fair, although it was, on a huge stage set. And I don't know, I just loved watching the show. But do you remember watching that show at all? Did you get into game shows as a kid?
I got into game shows, but I can't add nothing to the Funhouse because that's the first time I've even heard of it. But, I was a big fan of Double Dare and Legends of the Hidden Temple and I'm Telling and that other one you and Wyatt talked about on the 87 show on Nickelodeon where they're in the house, Finders Keepers.
Finders Keepers, yep.
And it sounds like it's kind of a mix of all those, so I would probably be into it, but I never.
Yeah, it's available over on YouTube. I found a few episodes here and there. Don't know if it's ever been released to like DVD or anything like that. I don't think it has, but it was just a fun kid show, and it was in the same vein as Finders Keepers and Double Dare and a lot of those trying to get through that obstacle course at the end. So.
Well, if I'd have seen it, I would have probably been a fan from the sounds of things. I'd never seen or heard of it until just now.
It was I'm pretty sure it was a Saturday morning show, but it was syndicated, so I don't think it was necessarily on every. It was on it was on Fox for a while, but then I think before that it was syndicated, so it was on different networks too. But it was mainly shown, I think, in that time slot on Saturday mornings where they did show some kids' game shows. So, but anyway, that was, I do remember that a lot, and being one of those shows that I really wanted to be on too, And I want to say too, there was a lot of these kids shows that had like the home game. If you like, one of the consolation prizes was you win the home game of Double Dare, and I think it was one of those shows that they had like a fun house board game or home game that you could play. And I don't know. I never got one of those home games. I don't know if they even sold them in the, in the stores at the time when these shows were on the air, but I don't know. That was always one of those things. You're like, I want the home game too. I want to play this at home. How do you play Double Dare at home? You could do it now because you can get all those, make your own slime and stuff and be a lot easier now, but I don't know.
Slime, my mother would not have allowed it to be played at home. So I could have went on Double Dare and won a play at home game, and she'd have just told them to keep it because she was not messes at that point in time.
Okay. All right. Well, what's your number 2?
This pick is more for what it became than what it actually was, and that's Good Morning Miss Bliss, the pre-runner to Saved by the Bell. Come on Disney Channel in '88, featured Zach, Lisa, Screech, Mr. Belding, and some other assorted characters, and lasted a season and got the axe and was kind of retooled for a year or so and turned into Saved by the Bell in high school, and the rest is history as we know it. But Haley Mills starred as Miss Bliss. I don't think I've ever read or understood why she wasn't included in the Saved by the Bell version of it. I guess maybe just because it was the difference between Disney and NBC, and she was a Disney, maybe under contract to Disney, who knows. But even when TBS would show reruns of Saved by the Bell in syndication, in the 90s, and they would start their run with Good Morning Miss Bliss. It was okay. It wasn't as good as Saved by the Bell, but you at least got to see some of the characters in the middle school setting before you saw them in the high school setting. I don't really remember any of the storylines from Good Morning Miss Bliss nearly as well as I do from Saved by the Bell.
Right.
But without it, we wouldn't have had Saved by the Bell. So for that reason alone, it would get a spot on my list of favorite shows from 1988.
Cool. Yeah, I did not make my list just because I guess I never had the Disney Channel. We didn't have like the extended package on cable. So, and I think that was maybe even a pay channel at the time, but it was one that I've never really, I don't think I've ever watched all episodes of it, but like you, yeah, I can see the homage. Hey, it became Saved by the Bell. So if it's got Mr. Belding in it, I'd watch pretty much anything. He was always my favorite, but good pick with that one. I can appreciate that pick. Even at number 2, man, that's strong.
It's on the list because, like, you know, it turned into Saved by the Bell. It's at number 2 just because it wasn't a great year for television shows in 1988.
Yeah, well, look at me. I'm putting kids shows, you know, at 3 and 4.
Well, you know, I kind of ended up ranking Miss Bliss, I guess, as if it were Saved by the Bell, and Saved by the Bell would have been number 2 on this list. So that's where it went.
Okay, I'll buy that. I'll buy that. Okay, number 2 for me, cable show. My taste in music in 1988 was all over the board, I'll say, and it was really I was really into rap and hip hop.
I knew this is
several years. Yes. So my number 2 is Yo MTV Raps, and I remember watching it almost every day. Ed Lover, Dr. Dre, you know, Fab Five Freddy, and this is where you got, you know, what the latest songs and everything that was out, and they do funny little things in between. I remember at spring break, you know, they'd always like bust out the Ed Lover song and he'd do his little dance, you know. But Yo MTV Raps, I just love watching these guys. And at one point, this is probably early 90s, because I know Naughty by Nature was early 90s, but they did like a promo for Yo MTV Raps that was "You Down with MTV? Yeah, you know me," you know, like the OPP song. And that somehow sticks out in my mind. But yeah, I don't know. I watched it religiously, and you know, being the white kid in rural Pennsylvania, I was, you know, I'm assuming I got looks from people from what would eventually come out of my car or my boombox or whatever at the time. But
well, I should have put this on my list. It's on my honorable mentions, but
okay,
because of the negative publicity rap music was getting at the time in the media, my mother was against rap music. And my brother was big into rap music, and I liked it too at that point in time. So it was contraband in our house. It was taboo. But when she would go to the store in the afternoons in that magical 4 o'clock hour or whatever, man, that's where the television channel went when we had cable. My brother and I just watching Yo MTV Raps and kind of listening for the car to come in so we could change channels real quick. And maybe that's why I fondly remember it, because, you know, you generally want the things you can't have. And at the time we couldn't have that, but by God, we found a way to at least 2 days a week to get it, whether we were supposed to or not. So I was a big Ed Lover fan. I still like Ed Lover. If Ed Lover had a show on today, I would probably seek it out and check it
out. Yeah, no. And it was kind of the same way for me. My mom listened to pop music. So she got some of and this was about the time, you know, when rap, I mean, 88 was when they had the first rap Grammy Award, you know, and it was hitting the top 40. So I remember her listening like Tone Loc and, you know, some of those rap songs that probably, you know, a lot of people wouldn't have a lot of respect for just because it was top 40. But she allowed a little bit more than probably what the normal person would, but I was careful too to pick which ones I was buying. So, you know, 4-letter words weren't coming out of my bedroom on occasion, and she would come in and try to take it away from me. But at the same time, you know, you could kind of decipher a little bit too on MTV during like MTV Raps, or just even during the regular programming, when one of these songs would come on, and you know where the bleeps are, you know how much they're bleeping out, and you can kind of gauge that. So you're not, you know, yes, at the time, you know, your parents are your censors, and you don't want to be censored by them, but that was the reality kind of back then, I guess more than probably now.
You know, I was 10 years old in 88. So when you're 10, you pretty much do what you're told at that point, or suffer the consequences. And
very true.
We just snuck around and done it, you know, like all kids do when they're barred from something. They find ways. My kids find ways to do things I don't want them to do. It's nature.
It's true. It is nature. Yes, very true. All right, we've reached it. What's your number one?
This lands at number one because I probably watched it more than any other show, and I probably watched it episodes multiple viewings than any other show, and that's Roseanne. Debuted ABC. Of course, you know, we talked earlier on the rundown about Who's the Boss. I never did watch Who's the Boss. I didn't even remember catching the end of it as it led into Roseanne. I mean, Roseanne was kind of tune in, watch Roseanne. My mom watched it. I think Roseanne has 3 distinct eras to it, though. You've got the first 2 seasons, and then what I call the golden period was after that, and then the later years that people don't quite fondly remember. But I think I was a fan of all of it up until the last year or two. The changes in the show, Roseanne working at the factory to start with and moving on to the lunch counter. And it was always fun following Jackie's career, or lack thereof sometimes. You know, I'm a policeman, I'm this, I'm that. And but Dan, John Goodman, held the show together for me. Dan was my favorite character. He was always, to me, he was the backbone of the show. Everything, some people would say, you know, of course, it's titled Roseanne. It played off Roseanne, but I think everything played off of Dan. Roseanne's best stuff come with Dan. Well, everybody's best interactions and most memorable stuff on the show came involving Dan. So John Goodman, to me, held the show together. The Halloween episodes, I think, not just to me, but to a lot of people, are kind of legendary. Even though I don't go back and watch old Roseanne now, I do have a DVD of the best Halloween episodes, and that is yearly fall viewing for us. It's the best of Roseanne Halloween. So it still has that watchability. I did not watch the new show when it came out, and I don't even want to touch on the controversy it's come since then with it. But I was happy for everybody who wanted to see Roseanne rebooted. But for me, that what it was what it was, and I didn't need a newer version of it. I would probably just as soon to go back and watch the old episodes versus even trying the new show. But it's number one on the list because, again, it was a weak 1988. Not saying Roseanne was a weak show. I'd say you could probably do this show with 100 guests, and well over 75% of those would have Roseanne somewhere on their list. So it's not just me. It was a popular show and well remembered for good reason. But I think for some reason I want to say that I remember not even calling it Roseanne back then as a kid. I remember saying, let's watch Dan. So, you know, John Goodman, I become a huge fan of his at that point. And I liked him in Raising Arizona, that I had just seen just before Roseanne started, and thought he was super funny. So then I seen him on Roseanne. I'm like, hey, it's that guy. And I was hooked from that point on.
See, I did that with Jack. Hold on a second. I'm getting an echo. This last time with Wyatt. Okay. Let's see. All right. This seems to be good. No, maybe not. Let me get an echo. Stop it, please. Okay. I remember that with Jackie because she was on Uncle Buck. And every time that's the neighbor lady, that's hitting on Buck. But for me, I don't know what it was. I just never really connected with Roseanne. I remember watching it more when it was like reruns on TBS, I think, later on after, it pretty much had ended. And I know if like you, if I was going to go back and watch it now, it'd be the Halloween episodes, because I know those are highly regarded and they were really super fun too to watch. And it just became one of those, I don't know, kind of weird traditions, you know, like I guess like the Treehouse of Horror with the Simpsons that people look forward to every year, you know, with Roseanne. When's the Halloween episode going to hit? And yeah, I don't know what it was. I just, if it wasn't, I didn't connect with a specific character like you did to get me to watch it a whole lot. But yeah, I respect it as a number one position, and I agree that it probably, I don't know, 80-90%, I would say, would have it on a top 5 list. I'm just in the minority on that on that one, that it made an honorable mention, but I didn't rank it just because it wasn't one that I watched a whole lot of. It didn't connect with me.
Well,
so, I am happy. I will say this about the whole thing that went down. I am happy they are continuing on, at least seemingly at this point, without her, after, you know, the whole comments and everything that she said, just because it's show, like you had thought that you didn't even associate her with the show. It's more than her. Her name might be billed on the show, but the supporting cast and characters brought so much that you just can't say that was her show.
Right.
So well, I'm glad they're continuing on.
And don't get me wrong, that show was built for Roseanne because of her stand-up comedy. I mean, that show was designed, it was to be around Roseanne, but it didn't take very long at all because of the writing and the actors who were playing the characters for it to become a full ensemble show, whether it was ever intended to be or not. By the end of the first season, early second season, you knew, looking back on it now, you knew that this is more than just Roseanne, and whether it started that way or not. But, you know, Roseanne, I'm switching tabs here just to look at something. Roseanne was on Tuesday nights at 8:30, which is the same time as Matlock. So I'm guessing that when Dad was home, it was Matlock, and when he wasn't, me and Mom were watching Roseanne. But its competition at that time, NBC had Matlock on for an hour. CBS had a show called TV 101 on for an hour from 8 to 9. So that probably wasn't much competition. And it had a strong lead in with Who's the Boss. So Roseanne, other than facing Matlock head to head, Roseanne probably benefited from the schedule, the time slot it was in, quite a bit too, to gain its early following. It stood on its own after that, but to get eyes on it to begin with, it was in a pretty nice spot, it looks like.
Yeah, well, the ratings, like we mentioned, it definitely showed that. And I haven't looked at the full ratings, you know, over the years, but I'm sure it was highly rated for the length of the show. Maybe even top 10 for the whole time, but maybe towards the end when it did, like you say, it kind of trailed off. Maybe that's when it did get canceled finally. I don't recall.
Well, it was sandwiched in between Who's the Boss, which you mentioned earlier was in the top 10. And right after it was Moonlighting, which was probably not a top 10 show, but it was a well-watched show. So it was part of a powerhouse lineup, it looked like, on Tuesday nights when it debuted. That's a good place to put a new show. They know what they were doing. Right.
Okay. Well, that's a very honorable number one pick. Again, this was hard for me. I was looking at the animated shows, like when we were first coming up with this, and I was like, I think I'd rather do the animated shows than the live action, because I didn't have a whole lot that I connected with. But having said that, probably the one I did connect with most, and my number one choice, was Empty Nest. And yeah, I went ahead and put it at number one. I loved pretty much every character on the show, and it, like you said, it probably benefited from being connected with the Golden Girls and the time slot and all that, to pick up all of the viewers that it did during those first I don't know, probably 2 or 3 seasons at least. And then later on, I think probably when the ratings might have dropped a little bit, or maybe when it was that Golden Girls went off the air, was when they added Sophia as a cast member to the show. And she was on for, I think, 1 or 2 seasons. probably in like the, I don't know, third or fourth season when they brought her on full time.
I remember after Golden Girls, they done Golden Palace. And then when it went away, the reason Sophia was on Empty Nest in storyline was that after she had left the hotel business and the other girl, she had moved into some retirement home down the street from.
Right.
That's why she was always, I forgot all of it. Man, it's been 30 years ago, but now I remember.
Yeah. She was in the retirement home there. But yeah, I mean, the characters, of course, and the the character that usually got me cracking the most was Laverne. Yeah, she was, Park Overall. She played her very well. I think she actually won several Emmys for her, but she just had that wit and those one-liners that just got me. And it was, and she kind of kept everybody on her level too, where the minute somebody would start, cracking on her, she had that comeback, boom, right there, and put them in their place. And she did that with Harry and all of his daughters and everything too. And then everybody there at the hospital. She was probably my favorite character on the show. And even Charlie next door, I don't know what it is about David Leisure, but he cracks me up. Yeah. even if you go back and watch those Isuzu commercials, I don't know. He's just got that. He's got that used car salesman personality, and he basically plays the same character on everything that he was ever in. But
yeah,
I don't know.
He's who I want to be when I finally grow up.
But yeah, and I do remember episodes too. It seemed like, and I think this was while Golden Girls was on, but they would have Dorothy on. They would have Betty White and Rue McClanahan. They had them all not on at the same time, but like they would somehow pop into the hospital or something was going on, and they would write them into the story, and they would stop by. So I think a lot of my affection towards the show has to do with them making those appearances. And you talking about that hurricane crossover, I had totally forgot about that. But yeah, I mean, that was great. I need to go back and watch. I'd love to watch those episodes of all of those shows again when they did that.
Yeah, I was just thinking I'm going to have to try to find a way to track those 3 individual episodes down, and I'll just make that a good Sunday night here at home at some point, is watching that. But, my mom and I, we watched that NBC lineup on Saturday nights, and I can remember Air Pop Popcorn and Ice Cream and those shows, 227, Amen, and everything else. And gosh, those were just good times back then.
Oh, yeah. Oh, 227 and Amen. I watched the heck out of those too. Mainly because of my gran, but like I said, she loved all the reruns. So it was natural when you had what's her name? Marla Gibbs. Marla Gibbs. I don't think it was a direct spinoff of the Jeffersons, but she was about everybody's favorite character, I think, on that show, because she just always put George in his place too. So that was a great show. With Jack A and all those characters on there as well. And then Amen was, that was kind of weird too, seeing George as the deacon, on there.
But you think about how much time has changed since 1988, that Saturday nights is dead television space. But look at the power lineup NBC was running on Saturday nights then. Big, household name stars in their own shows with Marla Gibb and Sherman Hemsley, and Golden Girls was a major show for them, and Empty Nest turned out to be a good show for them. You don't see those kind of lineups on Fridays and Saturdays anymore. They're just dead air.
It's very true. Okay, well let's go into some quick honorable mentions here. What did you have on your list?
Well, I had Yo MTV Raps that we already covered, and I felt like I would lose retro cred if I didn't at least put the Wonder Years as an honorable mention. I watched it. I would probably say 30% of the episodes in its original run, just here or there. If nothing else going on, no ball game on a Wednesday night, I may tune in and watch it, but there was nothing I was ever crazy about. Some of the episodes I watched were pretty good on their own. I did like the little, I could identify at that time with The crush that Kevin had on Winnie Cooper and the struggles that went along with that, of letting her know yet not wanting her to know that, you know, he had a crush on her, and the geeky friend Paul. So it was a good show. Those were really the only two I had on the honorable mention list, because there was not a lot to choose from.
Well, and again, I'm kind of embarrassed that the Wonder Years really never connected with me. And I don't know if it was just I went for the sitcoms more than the dramatic type shows at the time, but I've never really gone back and watched the Wonder Years. I've watched episodes here and there throughout, you know, when they were on syndication and stuff too. And I know, you know, I know the characters, I know kind of the gist of the show, but never one that I really connected with. So for whatever reason, talking to a friend of mine here a while back about it. He's retro minded as well. And he was talking about Wonder Years. He goes, I don't know what the appeal of the show was. And I said, man, you got to think that would be our parents' version of the Goldbergs. You know, we watched the Goldbergs to go back to that time, and they watched the Wonder Years to go back to their time. So I could see how it was a hit, you know, with people like me. If I was an adult in the 80s and grew up in the 60s, I'd have probably been a big fan of the Wonder Years. Just it was a little before my time. Yeah. I definitely agree with that. Another one I had on my honorable mentions was Dear John. That was a sitcom. Don't remember too much about it. The blonde-haired actor, I always liked him. I'm gonna have to look it up now, but I can't remember exactly when. I think it was one of those Thursday nights that they put Dear John on. I think it was an NBC show.
It was on after Cheers and things, and
I think
I do remember watching that, and the soundtrack, not the soundtrack, the theme song, just singing Dear John. He come home one day from work and his wife had left him a Dear John letter, and he's coping with it, and they have a little bit of supporting ensemble cast there too. I don't remember the details much, but I do remember watching it quite a bit though. So I must have enjoyed it. But
yeah, I mean, it was in the mix, like I said, with just the other shows that were on at the time. Looks like it was post Cheers for a while and post Night Court for a while. So that was probably why I picked it up. For whatever reason, I remember it being one that was in the mix. And then one that it was probably out of your viewing area. We picked up WWOR in central Pennsylvania out of New Jersey. It was like WGN, basically. And they had a show, I think it was a Saturday morning show called Steampipe Alley. And this was with the comedian Mario Cantone. And it was kind of like it was a children's program. They had, I think they did like skits, and they had little puppets and stuff. And they would bring celebrities on from time to time too. And it was kind of a little bit like, Hey, Vern, it's Ernest. I think they had little cartoon intercessions in between episodes, but the host Mario, he did a lot of like celebrity impressions. Like he would do like a Julia Child like cooking show, and for some reason I remember him being Sammy Davis Jr., you know, some of those celebrities like that. And he's been around. I think he was mainly a stand-up comic. I've heard him on the Gilbert Gottfried podcast. He's been on there, I think, a couple times. But it was one I remember watching Saturday mornings on that WWOR channel out of New Jersey. But that's pretty much it. I did have Roseanne as an honorable mention too. So those were my 4 honorable mentions. Now you said you had a TV guide?
Yeah, I got a TV Guide fall preview from 1988, and getting ready for this, I was looking through it, and I was coming across shows that I don't remember hearing anything about. Well, some of them I do. I just never watched, but there was a couple. There was one that I never hear about that starred Tim Daly, you know, from Wings. It was called It's called Almost Grown, and it was about this married couple. It was an hour-long show, but it recapped their life through the decades of the 60s, 70s, and 80s. So that sounded like an interesting concept. And the pictures they show, you see them at Woodstock, you see them with the leisure suits in the 70s, and then you see them dressed like characters from Miami Vice in the 80s. And I'm thinking, I would like to go back and find that now to watch as a period piece and see how they interpreted everything. And Tim Daly, I loved on Wings. Of course, this would be a drama, not a comedy. I don't know how well that plays to his strengths, but I'm sure it would be interesting to check out. But then some other shows that came out that would probably, if we at least don't mention, people are going to be upset by. Murphy Brown debuted in 1988, I think.
Oh, it did?
Yeah.
I was thinking it was maybe later. But yeah, it was one I remember parents watching, but it just never really connected with me. And I know they're rebooting it too, and a lot of people are excited about that.
Well, if it came later, at least in the fall of '88, TV Guide was expecting it to debut because it got a whole page on it. Mary Tyler Moore had a new show in 1988 where she's living with her daughter and grandson in New York. Never heard of it. Watched it. Dirty Dancing, the TV series, debuted in '88. I had not seen Dirty Dancing, the movie, at that point that the TV series would have come out, so it probably didn't register with me. But now I'm kind of curious. I'd like to go back and check out an episode or so and see what it was like.
There are several of those 80s movies that spun off a TV series kind of in that time frame. I did a piece on Rediscover the 80s from 1990 that had several. It was like Uncle Buck and Ferris Bueller, those type shows. Look Who's Talking. It's amazing how many that actually spawned a TV series that really didn't last more than whatever the first season of episodes. And I don't even recall who starred in the Dirty Dancing TV series. So
that would have been Patrick Cassidy and Melora Hardin. I'm not familiar.
Okay. I'll take your word for it.
Another movie turned TV series in 1988, Baby Boom. I think I remember seeing an episode or two of that. Maybe. I'm not sure.
I have seen that movie because of my wife, but it's been a while.
This is one that I wish I had watched then now. Mission Impossible television series debuted in 1988.
Yeah.
And the last one I have here is ABC Saturday Night Mystery Movie. That was a series rotating 3 different 2-hour movies in revolving fashion. One was Columbo, which was a staple in series like that.
Of course.
Then you had Burt Reynolds starring in one that was untitled as of the writing, where he was a retired New York policeman who moved to Florida to become a private investigator in a series of 2-hour films. As big of a Burt Reynolds fan as I am, I think I would have come across that. So maybe that didn't end up happening. And then the final one starred Louis Gossett Jr. as an anthropology professor who traveled the world kind of Indiana Jones style. That would have been a pretty good revolving series to watch on Saturday nights back then.
Yeah.
If all that actually came to pass. And, well, you would think it did, at least for a little bit, because this fall preview is dated October 1st, 1988. So at that point, you would think it was pretty well locked into the schedule.
Yeah. Yeah, of course, Columbo, I don't know. It seemed like there's a Columbo movie on every weekend somewhere. And that was more, I guess, my parents' generation to watch. And I've never really got into those films. But I know he was around for a very long time doing the show and movies. You know,
yeah, before 88, he would have been in the revolving mystery movie with McMillan and Wife, NBC, maybe. I think NBC had. I know my parents watch a lot of Columbo. You know, you could go straight from Murder, She Wrote to Columbo, and I would just go to bed at 7 p.m. on Sunday night. I'm done.
Absolutely. Okay, you got anything else for us out of that preview?
No, it's got a bunch of good looking ads in it though.
Well, you might have to scan that and put it up there on Renter Ramblings.
You remember Joe Camel from the Camel ads there?
Absolutely.
I probably will scan a bunch of these in at some point. But
yeah, I watched the video where you're flipping through the comic book with all the ads, and those, a lot of those, I don't know. I get excited about stuff I haven't seen before. There was an issue of, what was it? I just picked up, and it had a picture of one of the Ninja Turtles on the back holding up a cassette, and it was for I think a book and tape, like storybook that they had on the back of the cover. And I was like, that is a very cool ad. I had to snap it. I think I put it up on Instagram. But I don't know what it is about those ads too. I love looking at vintage ads and seeing almost like new art, you know, to me.
When I was at the comic convention yesterday, I picked up, I don't know, a handful, 20 or so cheap quarter books, 50-cent books. And I'm looking at them not for what they are and not for what the story is. I'm opening the inside cover, the back cover, and looking at the back, and I'm finding the ones with good ads.
I do the same thing.
So, because I know if those 3 ads are good, chances are the rest of them within the book are going to be at least decent, or for the right era and the right type of products. But,
yeah, a lot of them you get the staple, you know, like the Superpowers action figure collection. You know, there's a lot of those are in those, and there's is it Hubba Bubba, or one of the bubblegum ads I've seen in tons of those. But every once in a while you'll do find one for video games or something in there. You're like, oh man, this is glorious. I want it as a poster, and put it on my wall somewhere. But
I found one yesterday. My favorite Nintendo game was Castlevania 2 Simon's Quest. I have never seen any kind of advertising for it until yesterday. The inside cover of some issue of X Factor was an ad for Simon's Quest, and I'm like, yeah, hey, how much is this? I want that. So that one I am going to actually frame and probably put up here somewhere. As I'm currently working on where I plan on starting a podcast soon. This is we're building a small recording studio, that from my daughter and I's YouTube channel that we do. We'll be filming here all the time and stuff. So I'm going to fill it with retro stuff on the walls and around the
kind of
here. So.
Yeah, I wish I could, quote unquote, build a studio for Rediscover the 80s, but you know, what you see is what you get here in my laundry room.
I'm not building one. I'm just remodeling a small room here.
Okay, well, that's still more than I have.
Well, as far as I've got so far is the lighting. I think I've got the lighting good for YouTube, and now comes the sound quality and the decorations for everything else.
Right. Yeah, that's what I was admiring before we went on the air. The art he has behind him there, which features a lot of good guys and bad guys from 80s cartoons. So if you're listening to the podcast, go over to YouTube and check it out. Those are really cool. So, and I finally got I replaced my Transformers 4 movie poster with a Star Wars poster there. So I gotta kind of even up the sides there. But anyway, it's fun, and I appreciate you being on the show. I appreciate you bringing along the TV guide there and kind of going through that, and had a real blast tonight.
Man, I have to. Maybe next time we can do a better year of better TV shows. It'd probably be even more fun. But for what we had to work with, this has been pretty fun, though.
Well, I think our element is beyond TV, and we've got several areas that we love to talk about. So we'll definitely have you back on, and we'll get to talk about maybe something a little bit more to where we can put some real personal interest behind it, I guess you'll say.
Toys, but 1988 toys next time. I don't know how to track down what toys come out in 88, but I'm sure I bought a bunch of them, whatever they were.
Yeah, well, we might have doing the non-sports trading cards of the 80s too. I don't know.
Yeah, that'd be cool, man.
You got me interested in that. But anyway, appreciate you being here. You need to go follow Mickey over there on Twitter at Yesterdayville. Go to his website, retroramblings.com. What's the new podcast going to be called?
It's going to be called Retro Revival. We're going to be preaching the past on Retro Revival.
I love it. Retro Revival. So I'll be looking forward to hearing that. And just be sure you follow him on those places. I know he's out there on pretty much every place that I am, Facebook and Instagram. So just search the Retro Rambler. You'll find him pretty easily. So thanks for being on the show, Mickey.
Thanks, man.
And if you want to leave us your top 5 list, you can do that. You can find the show notes to this podcast over on rediscoverthe80s.com, or you can tweet us at RD80s at Yesterdayville. And we'd love to hear your top 5 TV shows of 88 and see if your list may be a little bit better than what we come up with. But until next time, this is Jason Gross signing off for Rank 'em on the Rediscover the 80s podcast.